I finally beat Cuphead, and I finally beat Hollow Knight, and I finally beat The Sims 4.
We're done when I say we're done.
Welcome back to A Little Escape from Reality. I'm Jack Brunót, and I talk all things art and entertainment, not just games. But today, I am ranking all of the games that I played in 2024 from worst to best. These are not necessarily games that came out in 2024. These are just games that I played for the first time this year, or last year. I guess I don't know when this video is coming out yet. Don't take the list too seriously. This is just an excuse for me to talk about some of my favorite games I played in 2024. In fact, I wouldn't say that I hated any of the games that I played this year. I'd like to think I've gotten pretty good at choosing what media I consume. I've never been the type of person to go out of my way to play or watch or listen to something that I know I'm not going to like. Massive amount of respect for the people who do that though. I do not have the mental capacity for that kind of pain. But don't get me wrong, sometimes I am incorrect about what I think I am gonna like or not. So I try to get out of my comfort zone as much as possible, just to a certain extent. I have to kind of wean myself towards something. So if your favorite game is not at the top of this list, just know I don't think it's bad, nor did I hate it. There just happens to be some absolute bangers on the list this year. In addition to ranking all of the games I played this year, I'm going to be giving some awards away to some specific games. The award categories are art style, graphics, characters, story, gameplay, soundtrack, sound design, world building, world exploration, writing, tutorial, ending, and replay value. Games can get more than one award, but don't worry, I didn't get carried away and give all of the awards to one game. There is one game that gets 3 though. I had no choice. This is not an objective list. This is very biased because I am a human being after all. I am not a robot. If we had the same opinions, that would be quite surprising and a little odd. But I mean, if you do have the same opinion as me, you're cool, I guess. This is my 4th end of the year list. I'm running out of ways to say. If you're curious about my other lists, go check them out. They're all out already. This is a spoiler-free video, and if you could please keep the comments spoiler-free as well, just in case there are people who have not played certain games from this list that want to go out and give them a try. That would be very nice and very kind and very good of you. I would love to hear some of your favorites from 2024, or maybe even how you would rework my list from your personal experiences. But I do want to remind everyone, we all found this video for the same reason. We love video games. So bullying each other's tastes in the comments just isn't gonna get us anywhere. I mean, if you're mean to me about my tastes, I'm not gonna listen to you. And I would expect it to be vice versa as well. So, and please prepare for some spicy takes, specifically the game that's at the very bottom of my list at number 24, because I know that a lot of y'all love this game. I'm so sorry. We're gonna be kicking off the list at the very bottom with listen, I don't get it. I wanted to like it so bad, but I just don't get it. I've done so much research into trying to figure out what people like about this game, and I can't get a concise answer. So if you could tell me in the comments, that would be fantastic, because I feel like I was playing a completely different game from everyone else on the internet. In fact, it even seems like the fan base of this game complains about literally every single aspect of this game. This is coming from Reddit, Google, Quora, and even YouTube as well. The biggest criticism I saw of this game was the writing, which I completely agree. And from what I understand, people don't go to these games for the writing, but wow, the writing was writing. I actually did find the story pretty intriguing though. That was what kept me going, and I did end up finishing this game. There are certain games on this list that I didn't completely finish. Not many though. Part of me wishes I would have quit this, though. I didn't even really like the gameplay, and I do like hack and slash games, but this one just did not hit for me. This was my first Devil May Cry game, so I might be more emotionally attached to these characters if I would have played the other games, but frankly, I'm not super interested. I did do a bunch of research into the other games just so I could know what was going on, and I did understand what was going on. So another really unfortunate aspect for me anyway was how they treated the female characters in the game, especially the characters who have been been in the franchise from the beginning. There were two female characters. I don't quite remember what their names were, but they were very prominent characters in the other games, and I was really looking forward to getting to know these characters going into Devil May Cry 5, but they very much just felt like they were there to look at. Like, you could have taken the characters out completely from the game and it would not change the plot really that much at all. Once again, no hate to you. If you like this game, and frankly, chances are you probably do, because it seems like everyone does. Power to you. I'm happy for you. I wish I was on that level. Also, if you're curious about the plot, to boil it down, basically demons come up from hell and attack people, and then there are some half demons, which are the main characters who are killing the demons. More or less, that's all it really is. Anyway, at number 23, we have
Won't you spare me over till another year?
The Dark Picture Anthology series is made by Supermassive Games, who are better known for Until Dawn and The Quarry, which are very similar to these games, but are miles ahead. I've always found the Dark Picture Anthology games to be pretty fun, and for the most part, I still agree with that when it comes to The Devil in Me. These are the type of games you should sit down with a couple of your friends and just pass the controller around as you're going through the characters, trying to keep them all alive by the end. They are choice-based horror games which have multiple endings, and the whole entire point is you're trying to keep all of the characters alive. I do unfortunately think that The Devil in Me is probably my least favorite from the batch, and I think this is going to be the final nail in the coffin for me. I think I'm done with this series from now on. For a horror game, this was just quite boring, to say the least. Until like maybe the last 5-10 minutes where it's just pure action. This is the spot where you're going to get all of your characters killed, even though you kept the majority of them alive throughout that point. The game follows 5 characters who are a part of a film crew for a serial killer docuseries. They are invited to film an episode at real-life serial killer's house, H.H. Holmes, many decades after he was already confirmed dead. However, turns out there's a copycat killer we never technically get the identity of, while at the same time it's very clear who it is the entire time. If you're a fan of horror or crime thrillers, I'm gonna be honest, this is not for you. As I said, it's kind of just dumb fun, and if you want to sit down with your friends and just make fun of the dialogue and the characters, go for it. I think that's the best way to consume these games. If you really like this idea, go play Until Dawn, which was their first game in this genre. That game is an absolute masterpiece. This is gonna be a long ass video. Holy shit. Next, we have... I played the first 2 Uncharted games this year, and don't worry, Uncharted 2 is much higher on the list. Uncharted 1 is a perfectly fine starting point, but overall, it's pretty much just a game that exists. It was fine. You could tell it's very dated. I think it came out in like the early 2000s. It was one of those peak era PlayStation platforming games. Uncharted is an action-adventure series with a heavy emphasis on puzzles, who follows Nathan Drake, a treasure hunter. I haven't played 2 or 3 yet. I'm probably gonna play those in 2025, but I would still highly recommend this entire series, and if you want to know what's going on with the characters, you are going to have to play this game first. And as I said, it's fine. It's just not going to be one of your favorite games. Next, at number 21, we have... This is a cute little co-op puzzle platformer in which you play as yarnies, which are little guys made of yarn. There really isn't much else to it besides that, but it is a fun time. I love me a good couch co-op game. This is not the only couch co-op game on the list. So if you're looking for a cute little game to play with your friends or a significant other, give this one a go. You do not need to play the first game. In fact, I haven't played the first game. Unravel 1 is only a single player experience, so I'm a little less interested in it. Oh, also the graphics are really beautiful. Next, we have the first game on the list that I did not complete. Honestly, I was just kind of bored. I'm a big fan of Metroidvanias, but I played a really big Metroidvania right before this, so it might have burnt me out. But I made it about halfway through this Ori game, so I figured I should include it on the list. I've heard that the sequel is a lot better, and I had the understanding that you had to play the first one to understand the second one, but now, if I'm correct, that isn't the case. I am still probably going to play the second one because I've heard so many great things about it. I do really love the art style here. It's very cute and beautiful to look at. And if you never played a Metroidvania game before, this might actually be a good place to start. start. It does have a little bit of a learning curve, but it's nothing crazy or anything like that. My biggest issue with it was the combat. It felt a little button mashy to me, but the platforming elements were fantastic. Ori and the Blind Forest follows a forest spirit who sets off on a journey to stop an infection invading its home. It's kind of crazy that I didn't complete this game because the story made me cry in the first 5 minutes, which is like never happened before. Like the beginning hurts my soul. Next, we have all of the criticisms that I'm going to throw at this game come from a good place. I really loved this game, but there's just a couple of elements that just absolutely ruined it for me. This game follows two orphans of royalty during the Black Plague. It is a puzzle stealth game that has light combat elements as well. I really liked the story and the characters here. However, I was wishing for a little bit more depth. I didn't feel emotionally attached to any characters besides the two main characters here. Also, the main antagonist kind of felt a little cartoonishly evil. What this game has down though is its aesthetic. You will feel an immense amount of dread, but also melancholy going through this world. There are rats and dead bodies everywhere. The graphics are downright stunning. I found myself just sitting there and staring at the screen. I took so many screenshots. In fact, I am giving away the first award of the video to A Plague Tale: Innocence, which is the Graphics Award. This is different than the Art Style Award. We are talking about specifically how beautiful and realistic the graphics are. There are a couple of other games that I could have given this to a little bit higher on the list, but I wanted to give a little bit of a shout out to this game because I don't think it's bad by any means, but it does have some serious flaws. One of that being the combat. I almost wish there was no combat in this game because I think it completely ruined it by the end. For the most part, about the first 2/3 of this game is stealthy. You are punished for going outside of stealth because the main character Amicia is only armed with a slingshot, which can be very difficult to fight with if you have a bunch of people coming at you. However, the latter half of the game basically turns it into a third-person shooter, but you only have a really clunky slingshot. All of a sudden, you're not allowed to be stealthy, and the last chapter felt downright maddening. Honestly, I can't believe I even finished the game. I'm not one to rage quit, but the mechanics here were just so broken for what the game was supposed to be. It's not even like it was hard like a Souls game, because those games, they're hard, but they're fair. If you die, it's your fault. Here, on the other hand, if you die, it's absolutely not your fault whatsoever. It really is too bad because I was planning on playing the sequel. I really did like the main characters here, but the mishandling at the end completely ruined my drive to give it a try. If you have played the sequel and they fixed these issues, let me know in the comments, but from what I understand based on the research that I've done, they didn't really, is what it is, I suppose. At number 18, we have I know, seems kind of low on the list. Just hear me out. At this point on the list, I think everything is pretty solid. I just have certain games that I like more than others. As I said, I love a good couch co-op game, and A Way Out is from Hazelight, which are known for making these kind of games. A couple years ago, I played It Takes Two, which was their follow-up to A Way Out, and that remains to be my favorite couch co-op game of all time. A Way Out is much darker and grittier than It Takes Two, with more of a third-person shooter stealth type of gameplay as opposed to a platformer. This game follows two guys in prison for differing reasons who both need to get out ASAP. So they concoct an escape plan and go after the man who ruined both of their lives. Going into this game, I was kind of hoping that the prison section would be a little bit longer. I wanted more depth into the prison escape. The majority of the game is spent outside of the prison, and to be fair, the gameplay gets much better in this part of the game, specifically because you don't feel claustrophobic. But I was hoping for like Prison Break, the TV show level escape here. If you haven't watched that TV show, seriously, go do it. Season 1, one of the greatest seasons of television I've ever seen. However, as the game unfolds, it continues to get better and better, especially with the ending. I absolutely loved the twist at the end here. I was not expecting it because it just didn't seem like the type of game that was going to have a twist, so I was very blindsided. All around, solid experience. Okay, now we're gonna get into a controversial take. We have Once again, I don't hate any of these games. I did not hate this game. I think my biggest issue is I had very high expectations going into 1 after having played Red Dead Redemption 2. I was under the impression that there was going to be much more of a focus on the former gang. Before I get too into it, let me explain the plot. Red Dead Redemption 1 follows John Marston, a former outlaw from the Wild West. After having his wife and kid taken by the government, he is tasked with hunting down each one of the remaining gang members. Now, in Red Dead Redemption 2, we are playing alongside John Marston and the rest of the gang in their heyday, and I loved that element so much, and I was really hoping that there was going to be more of an emphasis on hunting down the former gang members. And while technically that is the plot, it just didn't feel connected enough to the second game for me. And I know this game came first, so maybe if I would have played this game first, my opinion would be different. And once again, it was not a bad game. I just didn't feel as connected to the new characters in this game as opposed to 2. The gameplay was just as good as ever. I mean, to a certain extent. I mean, Red Dead Redemption 2 gameplay is like crazy phenomenal. Gameplay is still good here. I was just kind of let down when it came to the narrative. Also, the ending made me sad, which makes me mad. I'm also not the biggest fan of Rockstar games. I know their style of telling a narrative to be kind of all over the place, not super focused, but I think it worked really well in Red Dead Redemption 2. I'm not the biggest fan of the GTA series, so I think that could kind of give you an idea of my issues with Red Dead Redemption 1. Anyway, I would still suggest anyone give it a go, but I would play the second game first and also manage your expectations going into the first game. At number 16, we are talking about This is a fun little puzzle game in which you follow the life of a woman moving to different places. Each level is a different year of this woman's life, and you are tasked with unpacking her things and organizing them into her new abode. This type of game really isn't for me, but I love unpacking. I couldn't justify putting it any higher, but this was just such a lethargic experience. Very, very relaxing. Definitely you can consider it to be a cozy game. I mean, you're just organizing things. It made my OCD feel very good. I was also very impressed with the narrative as well, because there is actually a story that is told to you through the things that this woman takes to each one of her places and where you're allowed to put them or not. Good vibes all around. Next, we are talking about Superhot is the most innovative shooter I've played this year. It is an arcade shooter in which whenever you move, time moves. But if you stay still, so does time. Your goal is to get through each of the levels, surviving, shooting people, beating people up. Very simple premise. I also really liked the narrative too. It's only about a 2-hour game, but it had like a nice little quirky narrative that elevated the experience just a little bit higher. Putting it on this list is kind of cheating, like a little bit. I played this game many years ago, but I only got to play it for like maybe 10 minutes, and it was the VR version, which, may I just say, is so much more fun than the regular version. If you don't have a VR headset though, the regular version is perfectly fine. I had a lot of fun with it as well. When I played it those years ago, I didn't get the full experience. I didn't get to like go through the story, didn't get to play all the levels, so I figured I should probably just put it on the list. It's also a very easy play. As I said, it's only about 2 hours. I blew through it and it didn't even feel like 2 hours. I have since played through it again a couple more times doing the specific challenges that they have on offer. And because of how addictive it is, I'm actually going to be giving it the Gameplay Award. Now, technically, there are many other games on this list that have better gameplay, but I just wanted to acknowledge how absolutely fun the gameplay of this game is. I mean, it's the whole point of the thing. It's the whole reason it's this high on the list in the first place. It somehow manages to be an action-packed shooter while simultaneously being a strategy game. Next, we are talking about the newest game on the list, which is take my opinion with a grain of salt because I am still currently playing through it. I think I'm about halfway through. There are elements that I absolutely adore in this game, but there's also elements that I'm just not the biggest fan of, and I'm trying so hard to push through it. This was the first and currently only Persona game that I've played, and I do think that it probably wasn't the best starting point. From what I understand, Persona 5 is a better kicking off point, but I've had Persona 4 for a little while, and I don't have Persona 5, so I gave it a try. And the game is is a little dated, but I'm not gonna let that hold it back because it's got such a fantastic charm to it. Persona 4 Golden follows a teenager from the big city after he moves to a small town in Japan. Once he shows up in town, he goes to live with his uncle, who is a homicide detective, and his young daughter, being the main character's cousin. Right when he shows up in town, mysterious murders start occurring. It is then unfolded that these murders are somehow connected to what is known as the Midnight Channel, which is a mysterious television program that only plays at midnight when it is raining outside. The main character and his friends then figure out how to enter the TV to prevent the murders and catch the killer. As I said, I haven't completed the game, but I unfortunately was spoiled and I know who the killer is, but I don't know what their motivations are and I don't know how it unfolds, so I am still pushing through to see that. The narrative here is by far the highlight of the game. I love the characters and the plot. It keeps you engaged and intrigued at every single second. In fact, interacting with the characters and improving your social links, which is essentially just doing NPC side quests, is my favorite element here. The game is a turn-based dungeon crawler with high school simulator elements. I like the simulator elements here the most, even though that's a genre that I'm not really the biggest fan of. My biggest gripe, which might not be a turnoff for you, is the combat. I really do not like the dungeon crawling aspect of this game. However, it's such an important part of the narrative, you can't really escape it. Maybe it's because it's an older game, but it feels very dated. I've heard that Persona 3 and 5 are a little bit more modern. If that is the case, let me know, because I do want to give those games a try at some point. The combat just feels very repetitive and grindy to me, but I do love the elements of the personas. It kind of makes it feel like a Pokemon game almost. Another gripe that I have, which maybe this will be reconciled as I continue to go through the game, but I do think that the writers seemed a little insensitive towards certain groups of people, and I can definitely tell it was the writers, not the characters. I'm specifically talking about the fat phobia. There are also a couple of other things that I have issues with outside of that, but I can already kind of tell that that's being reconciled, so maybe this will be as well. As I said, take my opinion with a grain of salt. I haven't finished it yet. The characters are really fun here. I love interacting with them. I've heard that the cast of characters in this game is the best in any Persona game. Also, oh my god, the vibes are immaculate in this game. I love this soundtrack. And even though the graphics are a little dated, it's clear that they put a lot of charm into it. And I love the different character art that pops up like when you're chatting with certain characters as well. Anyway, it's a good time, but definitely not for everyone. Next at number 13, we have This was my first and currently only Resident Evil game, so maybe I would have a different opinion if I played the original Resident Evil 2, but for now I want to stick with the remakes and then maybe I'll go back to some of the older games. This is just a fantastic survival horror game. Honestly, the reason it's this low on the list is because survival horror isn't really my thing because, I mean, it's fucking scary, man. Like, I'm expected to fight back. I'm not just allowed to run away. What is that shit? Resident Evil 2 follows two characters as the town they are living in gets overrun with zombies and other zombie-like entities. This is the very beginning of a zombie outbreak that started in the first game, so this is the first town that the zombies are overthrowing. At the beginning of the game, they get locked into a police station until eventually escaping so they can get to the bottom of what's going on. There is also a stalker enemy in this game, which I was not aware of going into, so that was a nice little surprise. A stalker enemy is typically some sort of entity or person that is very scary who is going to be following you throughout the entirety of the game. You cannot kill them, they could be around any corner, and the interactions you have with them oftentimes are not connected to the narrative unless it's a cutscene. I have anxiety, so that was not good for me. I'm going to be completely honest, once Mr. X showed up, I contemplated quitting. I'm kind of surprised I got through it, especially after wasting a bunch of ammo trying to kill him and then finding out that you can't. My favorite aspect was actually the scavenger hunt-like puzzle solving here. To progress through the story, there are certain items that you need, and of course, the items aren't just lying next to where you need to go. You have to go and find them. It reminded me a lot of this free mobile game that I used to love to play back in the day called Granny. Don't judge a book by its cover. The graphics are very poor, but it's a lot of fun. It is also free, so go play it. Next, I am planning on playing the Resident Evil 3 remake, and then I'm gonna go to 4, and then at that point, we'll see. I don't know. Let me know where I should go after that. Next, at number 12, which is the halfway point of the list, we are talking Hellblade is basically if God of War was a horror game. It isn't exactly a horror game, it just has horror elements. It also has puzzle solving elements as well, but it is technically more of a walking simulator with some combat. Hellblade follows Senua, a lone survivor of a Viking village. She then goes on a quest to avenge her loved ones, slaughtering these Norse monstrosities. But the kicker is, and this is not a spoiler, these entities are not actually real. You see, Senua has psychosis, and the way that it is depicted in this game is downright genius. The developers worked with multiple psychotherapists and psychologists to get a correct depiction of this condition. If you have anxiety, this might not be the game for you. Like, seriously, I don't really get scared or anything like that from games very often, and as I said, this is not a horror game, but the sound design and the imagery here made my heart just race. I seriously was having like some serious anxiety trying to get through this. The game actually makes you feel like you're going through a psychotic episode. That is why I'm giving it the sound design award. You're constantly trying to figure out if you heard what you just heard or you saw what you just saw, and your environment is ever changing, almost like a maze. Different voices and visions cycle through Senua's head, creating a captivating narrative with quite literally only one central character. In fact, we don't get to see the faces of any other characters. I do have it this low because of the gameplay. It was not bad, but it is like a little clunky. It was definitely a little challenging to get used to it, but once you do, it's not really an issue. If we were talking just straight up story, this would be near the top or maybe even at the top of the list. I found it absolutely fascinating. It really is a crown jewel of a story. So if you play games for the story, which is actually the reason that I play games mainly for the story and then everything else is just a bonus, this is an underrated banger. Go give it a try. Speaking of underrated bangers, at number 11, we are talking about This is an indie game where you play as a witch with a bow and arrow who has been casted out from her hometown. All of her friends and her older sister then go missing, and she has to go and track them down to figure out what happened to them. This is a fantastic retelling of the Russian folktale of Baba Yaga. It has a little bit of a rocky start. I would say the first like 25% of the game didn't really grasp me, but once the small open world opened up, it had its claws hooked in me. In fact, this is one of the most impressive open worlds, not just in an indie game, but in any game I have ever played. It is packed full of interesting things to do and fantastic views. In fact, that is the reason why I am giving the World Exploration Award to Blacktail. It really made me want to explore every single inch of the open world. And the game isn't super long either, so it is very much doable. I also found the way it told its narrative to be quite fascinating. I definitely don't think it is for everyone, but the characters on display here and the little kind of cryptic, almost unsuspecting twist at the end had my mind spiraling. In fact, the twist that we get at the end is so cryptic to the point that it's pretty easy to miss if you don't then go out and do some research afterwards. You could say that that's a bad thing, but I actually found that to be kind of interesting. One criticism that I have is the morality system. You see, depending on the things that you do in the game, you could either become the good witch or the evil witch. Whichever way you end up swinging will get you different benefits. While I did appreciate that the majority of the NPCs to a certain extent would lie to you, so it's not always obvious if you're doing the right thing, I didn't like how black and white the morality system was. But it by no means ruined the experience. This is such an underappreciated game. Go give it some love. Okay, cracking the top 10 at number 10. I promised we would be talking about it at some point, and here it is. And yeah, I know, maybe it feels a little low, but as I said, there are some bangers here. Once again, following Nathan Drake, the treasure hunter, with a revolving cast of characters, but literally every single aspect is better, especially the gameplay. All of the gripes that I had from the first game were evaporated here. For example, in Uncharted 1, there was no run button, and it made me want to scream. In Uncharted 2, there is still no run button. However, for some reason, the level design in that game, it didn't feel like you really needed a run button. There was also stealth in this game as well, which I really think the first game could have benefited from. The narrative is a lot more fun too, and I feel like I got closer to Nathan Drake as a character. He almost felt like a Indiana Jones copycat in the first game, but I saw a lot more depth and character growth here with him. Also, I think all of the other characters were more likable here too. So if you want to get into the series, you don't have to get too far in to get a masterpiece. I am very much looking forward to playing Uncharted 3 and 4, considering I can only assume it's going to get better and better, especially when it comes to gameplay. I'm looking forward to getting a run button. There better be a fuck. Next up, we have fans of Little Nightmares and Limbo are going to love this game. And what do you know? I love this game. Inside is a horror puzzle platformer in which we follow a boy in a dystopian world. There is no dialogue in this game, and the boy's motives are not very clear either, nor are the people chasing him. But trust me, the narrative still packs a heavy punch. The last, 20-30 minutes of this game are wild. I have made every gamer in my life play this game just so I could see their reaction at the end. Such an unexpected, I don't even want to call it a twist because it's just so out of pocket and weird. I don't even know what to say. And I also love a story that has an ambiguous ending, and it doesn't really get more ambiguous than this. Also, once again, the vibes are
vibing.
It's a pretty quick and easy play, clocking in at about 5-ish hours. Next, at number 8, we have this is the last game on the list that I have not completed, but it's not because I hated it, hence the reason it's in the top 10. It's because it is brutal. It is so hard. I don't know if I'm ever going to beat this game. I have played some hard games, but this is by far the hardest. It's laughably hard. Every time I would die, I wouldn't even get mad. I would just be like, yeah, that's not a surprise. This is just a masochist simulator. Sekiro follows Wolf on his journey to try and save a child of royalty that he was sworn to protect. I can tell that there are going to be some twists and turns in the narrative, but I don't quite know yet because, I didn't beat it. I don't even think I'm super far into it. I'm maybe 20 hours in. I beat 2 main bosses, and I think there's 10? That doesn't sound like a hard feat, but those are some really hard, tender feet. Very, very sore feet. Shout out Quentin Tarantino. I feel like Sekiro is the closest that you can get to becoming a warrior without actually picking up a blade and going out and fighting someone in the street. But unlike real life, you get more than one chance. You specifically get 2 chances. Please give me the strength to continue. Honestly, the fact that I beat Cuphead earlier this year does give me a little bit of hope, but Sekiro is just a different level. I see why people love it though. It is a lot of fun. It's just got such a high skill ceiling. If you're gonna try the Soulsborne series, do not start here. Please do yourself a favor and don't. Because the thing with a lot of the other Souls games is if you get stuck, you can go do something else or you could cheese a boss. But in Sekiro, the only way to progress is to just deal with it. Go try Elden Ring. I like that one a lot more. At number 7, we have the only game that came out in 2024 on the list. We have This was one of my most anticipated games. It is the second game from the developer Nomada, who previously made Gris, or Gree, or Grease. I'm not entirely sure what the actual pronunciation is. Gris is one of, if not my favorite puzzle platforming games. It is downright stunning and therapeutic and has such an important narrative, but Nomada went down a similar but different direction for Neva. Instead of being a puzzle platformer, they went down the action platformer route, and that did make me a little nervous. I was really hoping the combat wouldn't be clunky, and while I do think I still love Gris just a little bit more, Neva definitely delivered here. The amount of combat options options in this short indie game were impressive to say the least, and they were scattered across its 8-hour runtime fairly well. Neva follows a woman and her pet wolf as they protect the forest from an infection. The narrative is pretty similar to Ori and the Blind Forest, but I think the execution here is vastly better, not just because of the plot, but also the writing here as well. There is technically no dialogue except for when our main character says Neva, which is the name of the wolf, to call them over. But I've always found games that can tell an emotionally impactful story without any dialogue to be very intriguing. One of my favorite examples of this would be Little Nightmares 2, but Neva can be added to my favorite list when it comes to that. In fact, it even has a nice little twist at the end that I somehow did not see coming, and it was definitely one hell of a tearjerker. This entire game was just so sad in like a sad but also beautiful way. And I mean, also look at the art style here. It's a similar art style to Gris. It's the whole entire reason I picked up that game in the first place. These two games are some of the most beautiful looking games that I have just ever seen in my entire life. And that is why I am giving it the art style award. I could literally stare at every single moment in this game for minutes. Probably a little bit of my playtime was spent doing that. So basically my recommendation for you is, if you want more of an action-packed experience, give this one a go. It is by no means like this high-octane hack and slash, but it's definitely got some fun elements. But if you're more of a puzzle solver, go check out Gris. You will not be disappointed. At number 6, we have the This was my first and currently only Final Fantasy game, and I think this was a fantastic starting point. This game has such a unique style of gameplay that melds hack and slash and light exploration with turn-based combat. This is not a turn-based game though, it just has some turn-based elements. I was obsessed with coming up with unique and powerful builds, like way more than usual. And honestly, the crowning jewel here is the narrative. I loved the characters. They're all so different and intriguing, and I got attached to all of them almost immediately. I only have a few gripes with this game, one of which was I felt like it overstayed its welcome. It takes about 50 hours to complete the narrative, and in the latter half, it really felt like it needed to end. In fact, the last couple hours of this game were just boss fight after boss fight of varying difficulty. I do think the final boss was really fun though, but some of the other boss fights definitely could have been cut. Another gripe that I had was many of my questions that I had going throughout the game were left unanswered at the end. However, that was almost somewhat to be expected, because you see, this isn't just a straight up remake from the original game. Square Enix decided they were going to take the original Final Fantasy VII and split it into 3 new remakes. The second of these 3 games came out in 2024, and hopefully I will get to play that fairly soon. But because of that, this first remake was only 1/3 of the story. So a lot of my questions went completely unanswered. In fact, the ending made me even more confused and raised a lot more questions. And because I don't want to spoil myself, I haven't done any research into the answers. And as I said, I did not play the original game. I still very much appreciated the entire experience though. The game follows Cloud Strife, a former soldier, after he becomes friends with and joins a climate activist group. They then go on a mission to take down the greedy corporation that is ruling over them in the cyberpunk city of Midgar. I was honestly not expecting such an emotional and impactful story here. So when I found out it was about climate activism, I was on board immediately. If you are going to try the Final Fantasy series, give this one a try. All right, now we are cracking the top 5, and at number 5, we are talking about This has already become one of, if not my favorite Metroidvanias. And if you are a fan of the genre and have not played this, I mean, what are you doing? The story is fairly cryptic, almost like a Dark Souls game. In fact, if you were to mix a Dark Souls game with, say, Hollow Knight, that's essentially what you're getting here. But we follow the penitent one, the sole survival of a cult or religion, depending on how you want to look at it, after their god slaughtered them. The penitent one then goes on a mission to avenge his fallen colleagues and kill God. The aesthetic is inspired by Spanish Catholicism, which I feel like is not something that I have seen done in many other properties. This game is metal as hell. It is so bloody and gruesome. The world that you can explore is so fascinating. Like Blacktail, I wanted to explore every single inch of this world, and that I did. I believe I uncovered pretty much every single secret that there was to offer here, which took me about 30 hours. So the game isn't super long. If you just want to focus on the narrative, and you can probably get it done pretty quickly. But I would encourage you to take your time with it. It is well worth it. There is so many fun things to do. A sequel came out recently, and I am planning on playing it probably pretty soon here, so you can expect that on my end of the year list in 2025. The only gripe I have with it, which honestly is just nitpicking because I really love this game, is that I wish the boss difficulty had a little bit more consistency. Some of the bosses were brutally hard, while other bosses I went into it and did not die once and beat them immediately. I wish we could meet in the middle a little bit. Next, at number 4, we have a game that I was very much not expecting to be this high. I wasn't even planning on playing it until one of my friends forced me to. Up until playing this game, I was not the biggest fan of just typical platformers, but going forward into the future, I think that opinion has changed. I don't know if it's ever going to get better than this though. Celeste is a game that follows Madeline, a girl on a mission to climb Mount Celeste. There are definitely some twists and turns here, but overall, the entire game is focused on mental health. Madeline must persevere through her panic attacks and self-doubt, reconciling with a dark part of herself so she can accomplish her goal. The entire game is a metaphor for how we treat ourselves and ultimately what we can accomplish in life. Also understanding that panic attacks and mental health issues do not make you a weak person, especially if you keep going forward. If anything, it just makes you an even stronger person. The gameplay is also fantastic here. It is so smooth and addictive. This is another game like Sekiro that is brutally hard, but this is the first time that I've ever played a hard game where it was actually kind of a relaxing experience. With the gameplay being so smooth and such a tranquil soundtrack in the background, I found that Celeste actually alleviated some of the stress that I was dealing with in my life at the time. The gameplay itself emphasizes failure as a core mechanic. Each time you die, you respond in the blink of an eye, and you kind of get into this rhythm of just trying and trying again, and eventually, as long as you don't give up on the game, you will succeed. Kind of like life. I am giving Celeste the soundtrack award. There are a few select games out there that I listen to the soundtracks of outside of the game, and this is one of those. What I found really interesting about the soundtrack of this game specifically is that every single song is almost the same, except there are different elements. Many of the chord progressions and melodies are the same, yet each song sounds different. While I know Souls games have done a lot of good for some people, if you're looking for a game that is the definition of persevering through failure, look no further than Celeste. Ooh, we're in the top 3. Ooh. Honestly, I can switch the top 3 around depending on my day. I am unfortunately the person tasked with making the difficult decisions for this video. So going forward at number 3, we're talking about a horror game, believe it or not. I never thought a horror game would be this high up on a list. I am of course referring to Off the bat, I would like to say that this is now my favorite horror game of all time, mainly because of what it prioritizes. The goal of most horror games is, of course, to scare you, oftentimes paired with basic or convoluted stories. But Soma says no to all of those things and crafts, honestly, one of the most intriguing narratives, not just in gaming, but in general. Soma follows Simon Jarrett as he is recovering from a brutal car crash. He then goes to the doctor to get an experimental brain scan done to see if there's a way to stop his brain bleeding. However, once he goes to get his brain scan, the moment that it is done, he wakes up in a mysterious underwater facility years later. Soma is truly one of the most profound and philosophical properties that I have ever experienced. It plays with the entire idea of what it means to be alive and what it means to be human. It is a post-apocalyptic sci-fi story with gameplay similar to Outlast or Amnesia. Unlike the Resident Evil games that expect you to fight back, you are really just running and hiding here, doing puzzles while constantly looking over your shoulder. You come across many different characters that make you question your morals and judgment. I don't think any other medium besides video games could have told this story quite in the way that Soma did. And even if horror games are not your thing, I would encourage anyone to go and give it a try. While it is definitely scary, it is by no means on the level of a game like Outlast, which I would consider to be one of, if not the scariest game. It was very much tolerable, so if you can persevere through it, you will be treated to one of the most intriguing stories you will ever come across. That, of course, is why I am giving it the Story Award. I mean, there is no other game that really deserves it. And this is the first game on this list that is getting more than one award because it is also getting the Ending Award. I have never been filled with so much dread playing a game when the end credits hit. In my end of the year list for movies, the film that got my Ending Award was Gone Girl, and Soma gave me a similar feeling here. Okay, at number 2, honestly, it pains me to put this game not at number 1. I really debated putting it at number 1, but once you see my number 1, you'll understand, okay? At number 2, we are putting As I said earlier on this list, I really loved Red Dead Redemption 2 here, and it almost ruined my experience with the first game. I was very worried that it was not going to live up to my expectations. Whenever anything is hyped up like this, I get concerned, especially if I have to talk about it on the internet. But wow, I could not agree more with everyone saying this is one of the greatest games of all time. Red Dead Redemption 2 follows Arthur Morgan, who is one of the heads in a Wild West outlaw gang. This is in the particular time of history at the very end of the Wild West as the government started cracking down on outlaws. And that is a heavy theme going forward. I don't really have any criticisms here. Basically everything you could want in a game you've got here. I do think the reason some people are put off by it is because it kind of feels like a slow burn. Me personally, I love a good slow burn story. And that's why I feel like the Rockstar style of telling a story worked really well here. I think because all of the characters in the gang were so vastly different and intriguing and fun to interact with, I didn't find myself ever really getting bored. Unlike in Red Dead Redemption, where there wasn't really a core cast of characters, in that game you were, for the most part, just following John Marston. In Red Dead Redemption 2, sure, you are mainly following Arthur Morgan, but you get to know the rest of the outlaw gang very well. I was absolutely blown away with the realism of this game. Thought exercise here. Think of something that you could do back in the Wild West. I almost guarantee you that if you're thinking of something that is realistic, you can probably do it here in the game. I also almost gave the graphics award to this game because, I mean, it is jaw-droppingly beautiful, but I do have some other awards to give away to it, and I didn't want to pack too many awards into one game. The first award being the Writing Award. You see, the Story Award is more for the overarching narrative, while Writing is specific to the individual interactions throughout the story, specifically how characters act and interact with each other. There is no better game to give this award to. There are so many beautiful slow moments where you can just kick back in camp and listen to the NPCs interacting with each other. You can quite literally just sit by the campfire and listen to the stories of these outlaws without even interacting with any of them or participating in the conversation yourself. You hear the characters bickering with each other, or you see John Marston attempting to be a good father to his son. And this is outside of the story missions. The ending, or should I say endings, hit like a gut punch to the stomach from a old style revolver. It really was enough to make a grown man cry. And if you could get past the massive open world, which is a fantastic open world by the way, but if it's not your thing, if you can get past the open world and also how long the game is, you are going to be in for one hell of a treat. I am also giving the tutorial award to this game. I actually came up with the idea for the tutorial award specifically so I could give it to Red Dead Redemption 2. It is very difficult to introduce a mass amount of characters at the very beginning of a story, yet it somehow successfully did it in the most tense situation that you can think of. I really came to know and love each and every character, even the lesser important characters. And the tension at the beginning of this game showed what was to come as the slow burn story came to a sizzling fire. Like seriously, the amount of tension going going forward into the game was sickening. By the end of the game, I was like holding my breath because I didn't know what was going to happen. And like the last 20 hours felt like that, a longer runtime than most games. So you're probably wondering, if I love Red Dead Redemption 2 so much, what could possibly top it? Well, there's this little like miniature game that really took the world by storm in 2023. It actually happened to win Game of the Year that year. You know what I'm talking about. I'm frankly shocked how much I loved this game. Historically, I haven't been the biggest fan of turn-based games, but turns out I just haven't been playing the right ones. The amount of builds that you can come up with in this game is actually astronomical. Last year, I talked about how impressed I was with the game Detroit Become Human, with how many choices and consequences and branching paths there were. Baldur's Gate 3 makes Detroit Become Human feel like child's play. It's crazy. Like, it's actually crazy. Like, I feel like there will never be a game again that matches that level of choice and consequence. Every single choice that you make has an actual consequence. And just like Red Dead Redemption 2, if you can think of something, you can probably do it. Except this is a fantasy world, so you can do stuff that's not even possible in like a realistic setting like Red Dead Redemption 2. And speaking of builds, if you would allow me to geek out for a moment, I've only done one playthrough so far, but I played as a Drow Fiend Warlock, and I'm really happy I chose that build. I had so much fun. It was such a great jack of all trades kind of character, whereas the Final Fantasy VII Remake, it was about 50 hours and I was kind of sick of it by the end. I put over 200 hours into Baldur's Gate 3, and by the end, I was like, more, give me more. Quite literally, the rest of this list takes up about 6 months of 2024 for me, and then this game took over the other 6 months. I'm already planning my second playthrough. I want to do a Dark Urge playthrough because I've heard there's even more depth when it comes to the main character. I know if you've never played this game, you have no idea what I'm talking about, and I didn't want to turn this into like a Baldur's Gate 3 video. I'm sure I'll make other videos about it, so watch out for that. The narrative is a little hard to explain, but if we want to boil it down, basically these squid-like aliens start invading this fantasy world, infecting people with these parasites to turn them into these squid aliens. They're called mind flayers. You and your companions, who are all infected with these tadpoles, have to uncover what is truly going on, get rid of the tadpoles in their head, and overthrow an entire government. The Baldur's Gate series is inspired by the Dungeons and Dragons franchise, which previously to this game, I didn't really have any experience in. I did try to play it one time, but I'm gonna be honest, the Dungeon Master was, kind of trash, not good. But God, do I want to try it again after playing this game. It's not surprising that the world building is crazy strong here. It has decades and decades of stories and lore to be based off of. That's why, of course, I am giving this the World Building Award. As I said briefly a moment ago, the characters are also fantastic here. Not just the main characters, quite literally every single individual character, unimportant and important, and there are a lot of them, believe me, are so interesting and deep. It's crazy. It's very clear that Larian Studios put so much love and respect into this game, and how they handled its release also shows this. They are just a studded diamond of a developer. My favorite aspect of the game, besides basically everything, were the immediate characters, specifically your companions. Like, I finished this game a couple months ago and I miss them like real people. Maybe that's a little sad, but like, they felt like real people. Like, they were so well written, they felt like real people. You can see where I'm going with this. I'm giving Baldur's Gate 3 the Characters Award as well. I did debate giving this to Red Dead Redemption 2, but I mean, I don't miss the characters in that game like I do here. There's a reason that I put 200-ish hours into the game, and I am still planning on playing it again, because of the amount of choices and consequences that you can make here, and the vast amount of races and play styles that you can pick between. The replay value is truly infinite. I feel like I could could play this game 10, 20 times, and there would still be dialogue paths, character interactions, weapons, and full-blown plot lines that I probably would miss. And of course, this is the only game on the list that is getting 3 awards because I'm giving it the replay award. There's really no other game on the list that could even come close to getting this award. Why go outside and touch grass when you can touch the grass on the screen? Now, I do want to mention one quick gripe that I have with the game, but it is slowly and surely being fixed, and that's the amount of game-breaking glitches that I encountered here. Since the game is so crazy large, you are bound to come across a good amount of glitches, and the amount of game-breaking glitches here, frankly, were synonymous with the early days of Cyberpunk 2077. I'm actually kind of shocked that I was able to complete the game. With every game-breaking glitch, I either had to go back and lose like 10 hours of my playtime, or figure out a creative hack or cheat to get around it. Larian Studios very much does care about the community and the game, and they are continuously fixing bugs. But just because of how vast the game is, there are so many. The majority of the bugs that I encountered were not game-breaking, some of them were even funny, but I did encounter maybe 10-ish game-breaking glitches. It almost became part of the charm, trying to figure out how to get around all of them. And I mean, after all, I did beat the game, so it is doable. Don't let this deter you from playing the game, seriously, especially as time goes by and it continuously gets more patches. Baldur's Gate 3 is truly a game for the millennia, and that is why it is my favorite game that I played in 2024. That is it. That was my list for ranking all of the games that I played for the first time in 2024. If you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching it in its entirety. I post 2 videos a month, always on Fridays, so if you like this video, you might like some of the others. But before you go and check out those videos and click off this one, please remember, don't let anyone tell you what you can and can't do with your life. Stay safe out there. Bye-bye.